She came home early, expecting silence and safety, but instead, she walked into a moment that could have ended her life. Amelia Hale didn't know that the danger wasn't outside her mansion, but already waiting inside it. A black male housekeeper pulled her into the shadows and whispered for her to stay quiet, not because he was afraid, but because he had overheard something he was never meant to hear. What he knew exposed betrayal, power, and a truth shaped by race and silence. So why was staying quiet the only way Amelia could survive? Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Amelia Hale lived in a world defined by precision, control, and reputation. As a white female millionaire, her life was built on discipline, early mornings, late nights, and a constant need to prove that her success was earned, not inherited. To the public, Amelia represented power with poise. To herself, she represented survival in spaces that still questioned whether a woman truly belonged at the top. Her mansion reflected that control. Every room was spotless, every routine predictable. The house ran smoothly because it was designed to. Staff knew their roles, schedules were followed without deviation, and nothing unexpected was supposed to happen behind those gates. That sense of order gave Amelia comfort. It allowed her to believe that home was the one place where power couldn't turn against her. Adam Booker moved through that home differently. As a black male housekeeper, he existed in the margins, present, observant, and rarely acknowledged. Adam understood the rules of invisibility well. He had learned early in life that watching quietly was often safer than being seen, especially in environments where wealth and race didn't meet on equal ground. In the Hale household, he noticed details others ignored, shifts in tone, changes in routine, and silences that felt heavier than words. James Hale, Amelia's husband, appeared to embody stability. Publicly supportive, charming, and polished, he fit perfectly into the image Amelia had worked so hard to build. Their marriage was admired from the outside, often described as powerful and unbreakable. Inside the house, however, something subtle had begun to change. Conversations ended when Adam entered a room. Doors closed more often. Trust felt rehearsed instead of natural. Ryan Hale, James's brother, had been around more frequently than usual. His presence blended easily into family routine, yet Adam sensed a tension that didn't belong. Marina, the estate manager, enforced order with quiet urgency, reminding staff to keep to themselves. Even Mrs. Cora, a neighbor known for watching everything that happened on the street, seemed more alert than usual. Authority was never far away in Amelia's world. Captain Reed had always represented reassurance, someone with power, connections, and control. His name carried weight, the kind that made problems disappear before they reached the surface. Amelia believed that meant safety. That afternoon, Amelia returned home earlier than planned, expecting rest. Instead, the house felt different, too quiet, too alert. Adam noticed it instantly. Years of navigating racial hierarchies had sharpened his instincts, teaching him when silence was harmless and when it was dangerous. This wasn't just another day ending early. It was the moment where comfort, betrayal, and race began to collide inside a place Amelia believed could never betray her. And the warning signs were already there, if anyone was willing to see them. The shift happened quietly, the way danger often does when it assumes no one important is paying attention. Amelia felt it the moment she stepped deeper into the house. The stillness wasn't calm anymore. It felt rehearsed, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She told herself she was imagining it, that exhaustion was playing tricks on her instincts. Power had always taught her to dismiss discomfort as weakness. Adam Booker didn't have that luxury. As a black man working inside a wealthy white household, he had learned to trust unease long before logic caught up. He noticed how movement slowed when Amelia arrived, how footsteps sounded heavier upstairs, how timing no longer made sense. From his position, he could see patterns others never questioned. Years of navigating racial hierarchies had sharpened his awareness of when silence meant safety and when it meant threat. James Hale was not supposed to be home. That fact alone set off alarms in Adam's mind. When he noticed Ryan Hale nearby as well, the tension sharpened. The brothers' presence together felt deliberate, not casual. Their movements were controlled, their expressions careless in a way that assumed privacy. They behaved like men who believed the house belonged to them in every sense. Adam overheard fragments that refused to leave his thoughts. Timing, dosage, assurance delivered with impatience rather than concern. The words themselves were quiet, but the intent behind them was unmistakable. The conversation assumed invisibility, that no one who mattered was listening. That assumption rested on race, class, and power. Adam understood that too well. Amelia moved through the hallway unaware that her life was being discussed as a logistical problem. Her body had been warning her for weeks. Fatigue she blamed on pressure. Dizziness she ignored. Moments of weakness she attributed to stress. Now those memories resurfaced, lining up in a way that made her chest tighten. What she thought was the cost of success felt suddenly sinister. Adam made a decision shaped by survival, not heroism. He intervened before Amelia reached the room where everything would have ended. The act itself carried risk far beyond the moment. A black man stopping a white woman inside her own home was not a neutral act. It was one history had taught him could easily be misinterpreted, weaponized, or punished. Still, he acted. Silence would have been deadlier. As Amelia processed what he had revealed, fear began to replace disbelief. The house she trusted felt hostile. The comfort she relied on felt staged. James's absence from her side no longer seemed accidental. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was immediate, personal, and closing in. Leaving the property was not simple. Outside those gates, Adam Booker was no longer invisible. Neighbors noticed. Curtains shifted. Mrs. Cora's watchful presence lingered longer than usual, her curiosity sharp enough to turn dangerous in the wrong hands. Every step away from the house felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Inside the car, Amelia reached instinctively for reassurance. Power had always given her access to authority, to protection, to people who made problems disappear. Captain Reed represented that safety in her mind. His name carried weight, influence, certainty. Adam stopped her before she could rely on it. His hesitation wasn't defiance, it was experience. Authority didn't protect everyone equally. Sometimes it protected the wrong people. As they moved farther from the mansion, Amelia began to understand how little she had seen before. Adam's decisions were not paranoid. They were calculated responses shaped by years of watching systems fail people who looked like him. Trust he knew had limits. Silence he knew could kill. Back at the house, the absence was noticed quickly. Plans depended on predictability. When that broke, suspicion followed. Ryan Hale's confidence shifted into urgency. James Hale's control slipped into irritation. Marina, the estate manager, felt the pressure immediately. She tightened routines, corrected staff more sharply, and avoided questions she didn't want to answer. The house that once felt sealed now felt exposed. Calls went unanswered. Messages piled up. The illusion of order cracked. What had been carefully hidden now risked exposure, and exposure demanded damage control. By the time Amelia reached temporary safety, one truth settled heavily in her chest. The most dangerous place in her life had not been the outside world. It had been the space she believed power had secured for her. And the only reason she was still alive was because someone society had trained her to overlook had refused to stay invisible. The danger hadn't ended. It had simply moved. And as the truth edged closer to the surface, those responsible were already preparing to fight back harder than before. The reckoning arrived in a place built to celebrate control. Bright lights, curated smiles, and polished confidence filled the space where power was meant to feel untouchable. Amelia stepped into it with caution, every sense sharpened by what she had survived. To the crowd, Amelia Hale was still the image of authority and success. No one could see how close she had come to vanishing without a trace. Adam stayed within reach, alert without drawing attention. Years of experience had taught him how quickly a black man could become the problem simply by standing too close to the truth. He felt eyes tracking him, calculating him, deciding whether he belonged. The tension wasn't loud, but it was heavy, pressing in from every direction. James appeared with a confidence that hadn't yet caught up to reality. When he saw Amelia alive, present, and not alone, something in his expression fractured. The calm mask slipped, replaced by urgency disguised as control. Plans built on secrecy rarely survive witnesses, and this space was full of them. Ryan stood nearby, his posture stiffening as he realized the situation was no longer contained. For the first time, their certainty began to crack. The room sensed the shift before anyone spoke. Phones rose instinctively. Whispers spread. Adam recognized the danger immediately. Visibility had turned volatile. In spaces like this, proximity alone could rewrite a story in seconds. A black man at the center of a powerful family's unraveling was never assumed to be innocent. James moved first, driven by entitlement rather than fear. He closed the distance with force, believing control could still be asserted quietly. That belief shattered the moment hands were laid where they didn't belong. The crowd reacted before the mind could catch up. Cameras caught everything. The illusion broke in real time. Amelia stepped forward without hesitation. Silence had nearly cost her life once. She refused to let it happen again. Her voice cut through the chaos, steady and unmistakable. The shift was immediate. What had been private betrayal became public exposure. What had been dismissed as impossible now stood undeniable. Authority arrived not as protection but as confirmation. Captain Reed's presence carried weight, but not the kind Amelia once trusted. This time, scrutiny followed him instead of reassurance. Evidence surfaced. Movements were documented. Lines that once protected the powerful now tightened around them. Marina, the estate manager, stood frozen on the edge of the scene. The pressure she had carried silently finally collapsing into truth she could no longer manage away. Adam felt the familiar fear rise in his chest. History had taught him that moments like this often turned against people who looked like him. One accusation, one assumption, one wrong narrative. He moved carefully, aware that justice didn't always recognize intention. Every second felt like a test he had never agreed to take. Then Amelia made a choice that shifted everything. She didn't step away to protect her image. She didn't create distance to preserve comfort. She stayed, visible, intentional. Her decision disrupted expectation more than any accusation could have. The crowd watched not just betrayal being exposed, but alignment being declared. The atmosphere changed, not into celebration but recognition. The story was no longer about wealth collapsing. It was about who had been ignored long enough for harm to grow unchecked. Cameras captured it. Witnesses absorbed it. Mrs. Cora's familiar watchful gaze, once rooted in suspicion, now reflected something closer to realization. James was removed from the space that had once empowered him. Ryan followed, his confidence dissolving into disbelief as consequences replaced control. Systems scrambled to distance themselves from what they had enabled. What began as a private plan ended as a public reckoning. As the noise faded, one truth remained unavoidable. This moment was not an ending. It was the point where silence lost its power. Exposure had arrived, and with it came resistance from those who had the most to lose. The storm hadn't passed. It had only revealed who was willing to stand when the truth could no longer be contained. When the chaos finally settled, Amelia Hale understood that survival did not mean returning to the life she once knew. The mansion still stood, the name still carried weight, but the illusion that power guaranteed safety was gone. What had been exposed inside her home could never be unseen, and the cost of ignoring warning signs became painfully clear. James Hale no longer had the protection of silence or status. The confidence that once shielded him collapsed under accountability, and Ryan Hale's role in the betrayal followed closely behind. Consequences replaced control, not because power failed, but because it was finally questioned. Even Captain Reed, once viewed as reassurance, became a reminder that authority does not always serve justice equally. Systems that promised protection revealed how easily they could be bent or ignored. For Adam Booker, there was no celebration waiting at the end of the ordeal. There rarely is. What remained was the weight of knowing how close everything came to a different ending. His instincts, shaped by years of navigating racism and invisibility, had made the difference. He was not believed because of rank or wealth, but because he paid attention when others felt entitled not to. That truth stayed with Amelia long after the danger passed. Marina's silence, once used to maintain order, now carried consequences of its own. Mrs. Cora's watchful presence, so often driven by suspicion, became part of a larger realization: how quickly judgment forms and how rarely it questions itself. Every person connected to that moment was forced to confront the role they played, whether through action or inaction. The impact stretched far beyond one household. It reflected a reality many recognize but few address. Racism often hides behind comfort, routine, and the assumption that some voices matter more than others. Warnings go unheard not because they lack truth, but because of who delivers them. Amelia chose not to move forward unchanged. She chose awareness over comfort, accountability over silence, and visibility over denial. What happened did not make her a symbol, it made her responsible. This story is not unique. It repeats quietly every day in homes, workplaces, and institutions that rely on people staying unseen. The difference here is that someone refused to disappear long enough to stop the worst from happening. The question is unavoidable. How many lives depend on us finally listening to the voices we are taught to overlook? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and the fight to be seen. And don't forget to like the video. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.